Hello, and welcome to our online training on high-performing teams. My name is Sandy Rice, and I'm Vice President of Cardia Services. I'm joined by my colleague, Alfonso Carlon, a Project Director for Cardia. On behalf of the California Primary Care Association and Cardia, we are pleased that you have selected this module to support your professional development. Cardia is a nonprofit, mission-driven organization with a principled team of committed and passionate staff. We've dedicated our careers to helping health and human service providers offer their best to the patients they serve. You may be aware that CPCA is offering this training as part of their Patient-Centered Health Home Recognition Program. This initiative is designed to support member clinics' efforts to move toward and achieve National Committee for Quality Assurance recognition. For more information, visit their website at cpca.org. Before you begin this module, we recommend that you pause the recording and download the associated handouts on CPCA's website. In addition, we recommend that you do this session with a colleague. It will be much more fun, and you can learn more about each other while you're learning about teams. Several times during this session, we will ask you to pause the recording and tell you which handouts to use. High-performing, multidisciplinary teams are a foundation of patient-centered health homes. Understanding how to maximize your team's effectiveness and the efficiency of their interactions is essential to building and sustaining a productive environment. By the end of this session, our hope is that you will be able to identify the qualities and characteristics of a high-performing team, evaluate individual team attributes, and explore several models or frameworks to heighten team effectiveness.
To get started, let's spend a little time talking about why groups or teams are important. Much of modern culture values individualism. However, thousands of years of human history have genetically engineered us into group creatures. We've survived as a species because of our ability to work together. There are great benefits to working in highly effective teams. Some benefits to organizations include people develop greater skills, knowledge, and insight from one another, increased staff morale and motivation, increased loyalty to the organization. Relationships lead to a smoother, more effective, and efficient future collaborative work. Some ways that individual staff benefit include increased confidence in their abilities, more appreciation for the organization, new and deeper connections with others, new skills and knowledge that lead to a greater sense of personal empowerment. However, these benefits only occur when the groups are highly effective. Unfortunately, there are all too many groups or teams who are not. So we're going to spend much of this session talking about and illustrating how to make teams more effective. Let's get started.
In their book, Extraordinary Groups: How Ordinary Teams Achieve Amazing Results, authors Jeffrey Bellman and Kathleen Ryan outlined 6 needs of extraordinary groups. When these 6 needs are met, ordinary groups are able to accomplish much more than they may have expected. These 6 core group needs form 3 pairs. On the individual level, we all need to accept ourselves while moving toward our potential. The second part is the group. Most of us want to be part of a group. This gives us a bond with others that grows while pursuing a common purpose. The third part is the world, understanding the reality of the world while collectively making an impact. Let's look at each pair more closely. On the individual level, acceptance of self means knowing and accepting ourselves for who we are, which implies a fairly high level of self-awareness. At the same time, most of us have a need to move toward greater potential, sensing and growing into our fuller and better selves. To greater explore your acceptance of yourself and your potential, find ways that work for you, whether it's journaling, meditation, talking with others, or just deliberately spending time alone. On the group level, working together toward a mutual purpose allows group members to get to know one another, and that in turn increases the bond. This allows for more creativity, collaboration, and a greater sense of commitment. This quote illustrates the importance of the bond. Ideally, team members enter into the group process with a shift from a me focus to a we focus. 3 ways that the group can foster this include facilitating group process. Spend time discussing what motivates you, what you enjoy about your work, and what strengths each person brings. Bring lightness and humor. Have fun together. And use conflict as a source of creativity instead of something to be avoided.
Let's try a scenario. Your clinic is shifting to multidisciplinary teams in an effort to be more patient-centered and more efficient. One change will be for the clinicians to do less education that will now be done by trained educators. However, after this has been put in place, one of the clinicians is still spending just as much time educating patients as she did before the shift. If you were the group's team leader, what would you do? How could you use this approach to extraordinary groups to help change the situation? What strategies that we've discussed could be helpful here? Remember the 2 parts to the group needs: shared sense of purpose and creating a bond. Some ideas you might try include: have the team revisit the purpose of the shift to multidisciplinary teams so that everyone is clear about the big picture. Spend time discussing individual strengths and motivations. Have each team member observe the other team members in the clinic and provide feedback and support. Conduct cross-training to build confidence in each other. The 3rd level of group needs is about the world. The world can mean different things depending on the group. It might mean a larger agency within which the smaller group works, or it could be funders of a clinic, or it could be the community. Whatever this outside entity is, the group needs to understand the reality of this world and how it affects the group, while at the same time working toward making an impact, making a difference, and taking action. Think about your team or your agency. What external forces have to be reckoned with? How is this handled? Who is responsible? Are these external forces helpful, or do they set up barriers to your goals? In order for your team to have an impact, the group must share a realistic view of the world that influences your work. The most important way to promote this is to be sure that information is shared within group members, and that the group spends time discussing these external influences and how to address them. This ability to make an impact requires self and group acceptance among team members, as well as an awareness of their shared purpose that is reinforced by their bond. As the authors state in their book, the self met itself, then the self joined the group, and now the group goes out into the world.
Let's take a minute for some personal reflection. Take a moment to think about a time when you were part of a successful team, maybe even an extraordinary team. Do you have one in mind? What made it so? Pause the recording and think about the characteristics and qualities of this team. Why was it so successful? If you're watching this with a partner, tell each other about the teams you have in mind. Welcome back. We're going to move on now to talk about some characteristics of effective teams. What are some characteristics of effective teams? Here are a few. This is a little overwhelming, isn't it? We hope that you get the idea. Effective teamwork isn't simple. It takes a lot of attention and a lot of work. It doesn't just happen. You have these on a handout that also lists the references. You may want to take notes on that handout as we go over each of these in turn. As we go through these, listen for similarities to the extraordinary groups model that we introduced earlier. Clear purpose. The group has set clear and demanding performance goals for itself and has translated these performance goals into well-defined, concrete milestones against which it measures itself. The group defines and achieves a continuous series of small wins along the way to larger goals. Informality. The climate tends to be informal, comfortable, and relaxed. There are no obvious tensions or signs of boredom. There's a working atmosphere in which people are involved and interested. Participation. There is much discussion and everyone is encouraged to participate, but discussion is pertinent to the purpose of the group. When discussion does get off track, someone will bring it back. The members listen to each other. Every idea is given a hearing. People are not afraid of being foolish by putting forth a creative thought, even if it seems extreme. Alfonso?
Oh, sorry. The members use effective listening techniques such as questioning, paraphrasing, and summarizing to get out ideas. We'll talk more about these later. Civilized disagreement. If there is a disagreement, the team must be comfortable with this and show no signs of avoiding, smoothing over, or suppressing conflict. In fact, disagreements are seen as opportunities for expansion or creativity. Disagreements are not suppressed or overridden by premature group action. The reasons are carefully examined, and the group seeks to resolve them rather than dominate the dissenter. Dissenters are not trying to dominate the group. They have a genuine difference of opinion. If there are basic disagreements that cannot be resolved, the group figures out a way to live with them without letting them block its efforts. Consensus decisions. Most decisions are made at a point where there is general agreement. For important decisions, the goal is substantial, but not necessarily unanimous agreement through open discussion of everyone's ideas. However, those who disagree with the general agreement of the group do not keep their opposition private and let an apparent consensus mask their disagreement. Open communication. Team members feel free to express their feelings on the tasks as well as on the group's operation. There are few hidden agendas. Communication takes place outside of meetings. Clear roles and work assignments. There are clear expectations about the roles played by each team member. When action is taken, clear assignments are made, accepted, and carried out. Work is fairly distributed among team members. Each individual carries his or her own weight, meeting or exceeding the expectations of other group members. Team members respect the mechanics of the group, arriving on time, coming to meetings prepared, completing agreed upon tasks on time, etc. When action is taken, clear assignments are made, who, what, when, and willingly accepted and completed by each group member. Shared leadership. While the team may have a formal leader, leadership functions shift from time to time depending on the circumstances, the needs of the group, and the skills of the members. The formal leader models the appropriate behavior and helps establish positive norms. The issue is not who controls, but how the job gets done. External relations. The team spends time developing key outside relationships and mobilizing resources, then building credibility with important players in other parts of the organization. Style diversity. The team has a broad spectrum of team player types, including members who emphasize attention to task, goal setting, focus on process and questions about how the team is functioning. Self-assessment. Periodically, the team stops to examine how well it is functioning and what may be contributing to or interfering with its effectiveness. The group has taken time to explicitly discuss group process, how the group will function to achieve its objectives. The group has a clear, explicit, and mutually agreed upon approach, mechanics, norms, expectations, rules, etc. Frequently, it will stop to examine how well it is doing or what may be interfering with its operation. Whatever the problem may be, it gets open discussion and a solution found. Criticism is frequent, frank, and relatively comfortable. The criticism has a constructive flavor, oriented toward removing an obstacle that faces the group.
Again, here are all of the characteristics of effective teams. So now we have this great list of characteristics of effective teams. What do we do with this information? One thing we can do is to use this information to assess our own team's assets and challenges. Take a look at the handout on My Team. Think about a team that you're a part of and pause the recording while you complete the assessment. Welcome back. We hope that completing the assessment on your team provided some helpful insights. One way that we at Cardia have synthesized this information and put it to practical use is to use a framework that we'll introduce next. Pull out the handout called Effective Teamwork. You can use this to take notes as we go over this model. This model captures quite a few of the characteristics of effective teams simply through examining goals, roles, and procedures. This model is hierarchical, meaning that we start at the top and work down. One of the benefits of this model is that we can use it both to plan and to diagnose. In other words, if the team is having some kind of problem, we want to start by looking at the team's shared goals. Is everyone clear on the goals? Do we agree on the goals? If that is clear, then we move down to the next level. One thing that frequently happens with teams or collaborations is that we get stuck. When we get stuck, the human tendency is to find someone to blame. We focus on personalities, which isn't terribly effective. Having a model for both planning and problem diagnosis and solving helps us to move past this fruitless focus on personalities. One strength of this model is that it still acknowledges that we are human, and there are both personal issues as well as work issues that must be acknowledged and addressed. We can anticipate these issues for each stage.
Let's take a look at goals. What do you think this little fellow's chance of success is for achieving his goal? Probably not very good. What he could use is some help, and that's exactly what makes for successful accomplishments of goals, involving others. The work issues here are pretty straightforward. What's to be done, and in what order? The team must be able to agree on answers to these questions. The personal issues have to do with involvement. How much am I willing to be involved? And how can I help others? So what are some strategies to involve everyone? Use icebreakers. This may sound a little strange for people who work together all the time to do icebreakers, but we found that teams who take just a few minutes at the beginning of staff or team meetings to do some fun, getting to know you activities benefit from this. You don't have to do this at every meeting, but investing this time on occasion helps team members to relax, to see each other in a different light, and to build trust. Another way to increase involvement is to invite staff input on decisions. Being involved in decisions about changes will help staff buy into the changes when they occur. So, what if you supervise a new team leader who says she needs to get her team focused on work, not on wasting time on icebreakers and getting everyone involved? What would you do? How could you help her see that teams are about both tasks and relationships? Think back to some of the characteristics of effective teams, especially style diversity and participation. Hopefully, this team leader has also seen this presentation, so you can have a conversation with her about these characteristics and how they're enhanced by strategies that get everyone involved. You can also remind her that a good bond between team members can actually help them be more productive.
The next phase in team development is roles. Looking at this cartoon, what would you say is the secret of their success? Each person trusts the other two and lets go of control as they need to. When we look at the work issues, they're fairly straightforward. However, remember the cartoon where they had to let go? That's what the personal issues are about, control. These are some very tough issues to deal with, so we want to plan ahead and have some strategies in mind for dealing with the control issues that might come up. The first strategy for addressing control issues is deal with differences. Acknowledge them. Don't pretend they don't exist. Build on individual strengths and celebrate the differences. We'll spend more time on this later. The other strategy is to manage feelings. What are some ways to help each other manage feelings? Some simple steps are to establish shared group agreements or ground rules before meetings. Giving feedback as a routine expected practice is another. And finally, paying attention to and working on effective communication skills is a must. We'll come back to this.
The final stage to examine is procedures. Clearly, the fellows in this cartoon didn't pay enough attention to that. The good news is, these are much easier issues to address. The trick is remembering to do so. The work issues here are following up and following through. The personal issues that are likely to come up around procedures and follow-up and follow-through have to do with support, both supporting others and finding support for ourselves. Think for a moment about being supported. What do others do that help you to feel supported? Chances are that your answers had something to do with being acknowledged or others offering help. The two strategies that we found helpful are to reward work and to build team spirit. Who is responsible for rewarding work, for building team spirit? Most times, people think it's the boss's responsibility for doing both these things, but really, every member of the team can do both. We can acknowledge each other and build team spirit through little things like simply remembering to say thank you and offering help. Here at Cardia, we celebrate birthdays every month with a potluck lunch. The theme is chosen by whomever has a birthday that month. This tradition didn't come from upper management. It was the brainchild of a staff member who worked here years ago. But the idea stuck, and we continue to enjoy this simple method of rewarding one another and building team spirit. We find this model to be very useful, both in planning team projects and in diagnosing what's going on when things aren't going as smoothly as we'd like.
As we've described, the most challenging of these three areas is roles, since the personal issues that arise have to do with control. So we're going to spend some more time on the strategies for managing control issues. Do you remember what those strategies are? The two strategies are dealing with differences and managing feelings. As part of Cardia's work in cultural proficiency, we've found 4 C's to be very helpful in both dealing with differences and managing feelings. The first C is courage. The effective cross-cultural communicator is present, takes risks, and tries to lower his or her defenses. The second C is curiosity. The effective cross-cultural communicator has a flexible mind and an open heart, approaches others with a desire to learn, and is willing to accept alternative perspectives. The third C is creativity. The effective cross-cultural communicator attempts to understand the world from the other's point of view, tolerates ambiguity well, and practices a variety of communication styles, which leads us to our fourth C, which is communication skills. As medical professionals, you probably pay a lot of attention to how you communicate with your patients, but we sometimes forget to pay as much attention to how we communicate with one another. The good news is, if you've got great communication skills with your patients, you can use those same skills with your peers and colleagues. Let's take a look at a few essentials.
What's an open-ended question? Asking open-ended questions, how, who, what, when, why, is a great way to get people talking. Let's try a few. How would you change each of these closed questions to open ones? Here are some ideas. There are a lot of other ways you could do this. In addition to inviting more information, note how much friendlier the open questions are. Another skill that is very easy to use is affirming, which simply means making positive comments. It's easy to use, but how often do we use this? Think about it. How many times today did you say something like, "Great question" or "Good point" to a fellow staff member? A third effective communication skill is active listening, which means listening for feelings and then restating using your coworker's language. Some examples could be, "Seems like that's pretty scary. I heard you say you need to discuss this with your family first." And finally, just being present is critically important. Put the cell phone down, turn away from the computer, and give your full attention to the person you're talking with.
The last thing we want to address in this session on high-performing teams is leadership behaviors. Who comes to mind when I say the word leader? We often think of famous leaders, or our boss, but the reality is that we all have leadership responsibilities within our teams. We're going to look at some additional behaviors that each and every one of us can use in our teams to help the teams function better. Pull out the Leadership Functions handout. We'll start with task-oriented behaviors. But first, remember this model? The task-oriented behaviors help to accomplish the purpose, reality, and impact needs of the affected group. The maintenance-oriented behaviors help the group to meet the acceptance, potential, and bond needs. The first task-oriented behavior is initiating. This just means getting things started, or even just raising issues for group discussion. How often does this happen on your teams? Is this something that lots of people feel comfortable doing, or just the team lead? If only the team lead, that really limits the scope and content of your discussions and ultimately the group's future. Information and opinion giving. Each team member brings a perspective and experience that is unique and of value to the entire group. However, some people have a harder time offering their opinions or information that they have than others. If you're one of these people, we encourage you to go back to our earlier discussion on self-awareness and explore what's stopping you from offering your valuable opinions and information. Information and opinion seeking. This builds on what we talked about in the last slide. Some people could use encouragement to offer information and opinions. If you're one who does a lot of talking, remember the 4 C's, especially curiosity, and ask open-ended questions. Clarifying and elaborating. We don't always have to have original ideas. It's very helpful to rephrase others' ideas and build on them. Summarizing shouldn't happen just at the end of a meeting, but throughout a meeting or discussion. This periodic tidying up moves the group along. Consensus taking. We often assume everyone agrees without actually asking everyone to state their vote. So when the group is moving a little too fast, it can be valuable to ask the group to pause for a moment and actually check in on what each person is thinking. Now on to maintenance-oriented behaviors.
Gatekeeping means keeping an eye and ear on who's doing all the talking and helping to make sure everyone's voice is heard. Another helpful behavior is encouraging the quieter folks to speak up and the vocal ones to step back. Harmonizing and compromising. Sometimes people get stuck in their viewpoint and they don't realize they're really in agreement, but too close to the issues to recognize it. So it can be helpful to point that out. But watch out that you don't do this when there is truly a difference of opinion. Remember the value of conflict and that it can lead to greater creativity. Pause the recording and complete the TOB and MOB self-assessment profile. Let's see if we can pull all of this together with one last scenario. You are implementing an electronic health records system in your clinic, and the director announced that there will be a team to move this effort forward. The team will have representatives from each department: front desk, medical records, administrative supervisor, clinician, lead nurse, medical assistant, medical director, and lab technician. The team is in their 4th meeting. The clinical folks have been meeting separately, and the administrative staff, including front desk and medical records, have been meeting separately. Tension is rising because each group feels their needs are not being met. Given all the different models that we've discussed, the strategies and the skills, what are your ideas about what is going on here? What do you think needs to be addressed? What are some ways to address this? What would you do? Pause the recording and give this some thought. Discuss this with your partner if you have one. Welcome back. Here are some of our thoughts. Remember that working together toward a mutual purpose and at the same time developing a bond leads to more creativity, collaboration, and a greater sense of commitment. So you might address this by having each individual state the goal in their own words and then say how they can contribute toward accomplishing that goal. Or you could have each person say what they think is the biggest benefit of this project to remind them of what this is really all about. You might also want to focus on roles and directly address the differences between the two groups, the clinical group and the administrative group, and emphasize the value and unique perspectives that each brings.
This brings us to the end of our session. In summary, we discussed the model for extraordinary groups, some characteristics of effective teams, a model for teamwork, the 4 C's: courage, curiosity, creativity, and communication skills, and finally, the leadership functions of task and maintenance-oriented behaviors. We've enjoyed putting this session together and hope that you find it useful.
And don't forget to celebrate success.